Welcome to the 8th lecture in Module 6, and in this lecture we'll talk about Ajax. What is Ajax? Well, it originally stood for this acronym Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, but now it really refers to this notion of how you can dynamically change content on the browser side in a web page. It refers to the interactivity that you now have with Web 2.0 and 3.0 applications. It's not really a single technology, but it's really a group of technologies that you make work together. The main function that's called within your JavaScript interpreter that's in your browser is this XML HTTP request method, or XHR for short. It's an API that's available, again, in your browser through the JavaScript interpreter that's provided using client-side JavaScript. Using this, you can make an asynchronous HTTP request to a web server. That web server can go and respond to that request while your browser is still interactive, and then once the data is returned, the web page can be updated. In spite of the name, any text data can be returned. So nowadays it's very common to return JSON data, HTML data, or just other JavaScript, and I'll show you that in a moment. The data in the script can then be used to alter the current document shown in the browser, again, through the DOM, without having to load an entire new web page. Again, using Ajax, you can update just portions of a web page. In order to understand how Ajax works, let's take a look at how things used to work in Web 1.0. Here we've got the client, browser, a network, and then the web server. And let's take a look as the user is interacting with the browser and makes a request. That request is sent to the server, and the browser's waiting until that request is handled and a response is returned to the browser. And then the user continues operating, using the user interface, makes another request, and so forth. The key thing to note here is the user is waiting during those time periods. And during those time periods, the browser appears to be not working or stuck. Ajax changes that. Let's see how. With Ajax, I show in the browser now the GUI as well as the JavaScript engine. And here's what happens. The user activity continues uninterrupted the whole time. If an event occurs that can be handled locally without having to go to the server, the JavaScript engine can do that. So you might do some client-side checks, other things that can run in the browser. If another request is made that involves an asynchronous HTTP request, that can be sent to the server. The browser again continues functioning, an asynchronous response is returned, and the web page is updated. The whole time, the browser appears very interactive to the user in this case. Now, the easiest way to use Ajax is through the jQuery library. It provides a full suite of Ajax capabilities. And here's a URL you can take a look at if you'd like to see how it does that. I'll also give you an example in the next lecture on how you can do that in the blog application. The $, and remember that $, means that this is a jQuery request. The jQuery.ajax method is used to initiate that asynchronous HTTP request, that HXR in other words. There's also an unobtrusive JavaScript adapter that's been built into Rails using jQuery, and it's called jQuery_UJS. It's automatically provided for you in Rails. Now, using this adapter, forms and links in your web page that have this data-remote equal true, they'll be submitted asynchronously using the jQuery Ajax method. Now in Rails, you can set this attribute using remote:_true. Here's how. This is embedded Ruby that I assume is in your form in a view, and so that's what this %equal means. And there's a form for posts and comments. We've already created this, and I'm simply adding comma remote true, and this makes this an asynchronous request. Let's take a closer look at how Ajax is supported in Ruby on Rails. Let's take a look at how Ajax is supported through jQuery in Rails. And the first thing I want to show you is if you go to Assets and open application.js, you'll see that jQuery, the jQuery library, and the unobtrusive JavaScript jQuery library are both loaded from application.js. And just to prove that to you, let's take a look at the running application.
So let's open up the Web Developer Tools, and if you go to Elements and look under the Head section, you'll see that jQuery.js and jQuery_UJS.js are both loaded here. So the jQuery library and the unobtrusive JavaScript jQuery support are both provided for you here. Before we use them, let me show you what happens right now. So let's go to our first post, and I'm going to again open up the developer tools, and let's go to network. I want to look at the network traffic, and we're going to create a new comment. And when we add that comment, there's going to be, up at the top of this, there's going to be a GET request right here for post. Let's take a look at that request. And you'll see that the request header, it says that it accepts text.html. Let's make some changes to our application so that it will make an asynchronous request, in other words, an Ajax request, and we'll see how this changes. First, go to Views, Posts, Show.html.erb, and let's add that remote true to the file. So we're going to add remote true, and this is what initiates from this form. It's going to initiate this as an asynchronous request to the server. Now I'm going to save that, and in order for this to work, we also have to go to our comments controller, because this is where the comment is created. So under controllers, go to the comments controller, and you'll see under the create method, remember this is the method that's called in order to create the new comment. Currently we can respond to an HTML request or a request for JSON to be returned. Well, we need to add one, format.js, because we're going to be responding to this request with JavaScript. So let's save that. Let's go back to our running application and see what this does. First of all, let's clear all of this network traffic. I'm going to go ahead and reload this page just to make sure that the JavaScript is there. Again, let's clear this traffic. And let's put a new comment in that says this is an Ajax request. And let's see what happens. When I add a new comment, you'll see that there's an error here. But let's take a look at least at what it tried to do. And you'll see something different here. Now it says text JavaScript. So what happened here is that the request was made, an asynchronous request was made to the server, but the server doesn't know how to handle it yet. It doesn't know how to respond to that request and provide data back. We're going to see how to fix this in the next lecture, where we do our last iteration of the blog application.
This completes the 8th lecture in Module 6.